Hey everybody, good evening. This is Josh Satin with Growers Live on No-Till Growers, and I just want to welcome you to another awesome evening. We have Dan Brisebois on tonight, and I am super excited. Dan has got so much going on, and hopefully you guys got a chance to listen to Dan on the podcast. So we'll get to Dan in a second, but I do have a couple of announcements I want to talk about. Let's just get all that out of the way. So first of all, hope you guys have been enjoying this show. We've been doing this every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, and we're going to be as consistent as possible with that. And moving forwards, we're going to take a couple nights off just because we realize that Tuesday lines up with New Year's and Christmas. So we'll be off the 24th and the 31st. There won't be a live show. We'll be coming back on January 7th with Dr. Elaine Ingham. So we are super excited to have her on. That's going to be super special. So just keep that in mind. We won't have the next two weeks. We'll be taking that off for the holidays. The next big announcement I want to talk about is the fact, and if you haven't seen this before, is that Jesse and I decided to drop the video paywall at the Patreon page, and just for the reason that we want to try to share as much knowledge as we can with everybody. And I think the people that are supporting us, and we'd like to get more of that information out. So we're going to be releasing those 2 a week at the No-Till Growers YouTube page, on this channel here, on the YouTube channel, and that will be awesome. There's so much content that Jesse and I have been working on for months, and we're just going to be putting it out twice a week. Looks like Wednesdays and Fridays, so look for that. It's the really nerdy, technical, detailed stuff of farms that we visited, and it's like stuff that's like super cool. So we put out 2 last week. There'll be one going up tomorrow and Friday, so keep a lookout for that stuff. We're super pumped and really happy to be sharing that with you guys. So keep in mind that those videos, the podcast, and this show are all supported by the Patreon members. So if there's any, you guys could really consider just going over there, kicking in a few bucks. It would be super cool. I hate asking for money, but it's one of those things that we got to do to keep this moving. Jesse and I put in tons of time, and we're just hoping you guys can help support us a little bit. And if you're interested, Jesse's over in the chat. He's manning the chat, so make sure that you, if you want to ask him a question, he's over there too until he goes to sleep. He goes to sleep early, but he'll hang out as long as he can. All right. I don't want to get into this too long. The next event that we're having, again, if you haven't heard about this, is the intensive workshop in San Diego with Jared Smith of Jared's Real Food and Stephen Cornett of Nature's Always Right. It's going to be in mid-February. The details are on the No-Till Growers page, so go check that out. We still have some tickets for sale. Great to see you there. If we sell enough tickets, I'll be going out too. Jesse will be there. It's going to be awesome. And lastly, we have a sponsor for tonight. It's Dr. Elaine Ingham and the Soil Food Web. So I want to tell you all about the brand new courses that Dr. Elaine Ingham is just about to launch. As you may know, Dr. Ingham is considered by many to be the world's foremost soil biologist. She spent the last 4 decades pioneering research in how plants and microbes work together. Dr. Ingham has helped farmers around the world to reduce their chemical inputs and to simultaneously increase their yields and profits. With knowledge from these courses, you will be able to use a microscope to quantify microbes in the soil, and you'll learn how to optimize soil biology. This is key to rapid soil regeneration. The all-new Soil Food Web Foundation courses are being launched on December 20th with a special introductory offer of $1,600 off for the first 150 students. If you'd like to join the soil revolution, then please go to www.soilfoodweb.com today. And I just want to thank Elaine and the Soil Food Web for sponsoring the show, and we're also really excited to have her on the show soon, so very cool as well. Anyways, enough with the announcements. Let's get Dan in here, and I can't wait. If you don't know Dan, he's got so much cool stuff going on. I already said that like 3 times, but let's get Dan in here. Hey, what's up, Dan?
Not much. I'm doing good. Yeah.
All right, awesome. Thanks for being on tonight. I'm super excited.
It's a pleasure. I'm excited too.
All right. So Dan, tell the people in the YouTube space here, tell me about your farm. I know there's got a lot of details between the farm, which is a big a cooperative farm, which is really interesting. You guys are also doing a lot of seed saving, vegetable production, and then you're like super into spreadsheets as well. So we got a lot to talk about. So I know I gave a little overview here, but if you want to just talk about some of that stuff, that would be great.
Sure. So I'm one of the members of Tourne-Sol Cooperative Farm. We're a worker co-op. So that's sort of like it's a business structure, kind of like being a corporation, except it's a system where each person has 1 vote, independent of number of shares. So that's how we're structured as a business model. And I'm one of the founding members. We started in the fall of 2004. And at this point, we have 7 members, so 5 original members, and then 2 of their longer-term employees have joined in. And in addition to the 7 of us, we have 7 non-member employees who also work on the farm, so we're 14 people total. And we're predominantly, well, not predominantly at this point, but we're vegetable and seed growers. And so we grow 6 acres of vegetables, and we use that, we sell that, or we provide vegetables for 500 weekly CSA members with that. And then we also grow seed on about 1 acre. And I run the seed operation. And at this point, the vegetables about 60% of our revenue, and the seeds are about 40%. Though we do resell maybe about 30% of the seed that we provide is from other growers or contract growers for us. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but we're outside of Montreal in Quebec, so in Canada. About an hour outside of Montreal, and that's pretty much our farm. Yeah, and I also wear a spreadsheet hat, as you were mentioning. So I've during the summer I launched the Farmer Spreadsheet Academy, and I guess I'm helping farmers develop their spreadsheet skills so that they can plan and manage a farm that makes them happy and profitable. So I post a weekly farmer spreadsheet tip on YouTube and Facebook, and in January I'll be launching a course on crop planning with spreadsheets. So that's the short of it.
That is the short of it. So you've been involved with the farm since the beginning. You said what, 2004?
2004 was the fall. 2004 was our first garlic crop.
Wow. Okay. So were you farming before that?
I farmed for about 5 years before that. I was an apprentice on some farms, and then I also managed a farm for a couple of years. So I had a solid beginning when we started our farm, and the whole team had all worked on other farms. So when we launched, we knew what we were doing. We started off with 110 CSA shares, a couple farmers markets, and we were quite successful right from the beginning. At that point, we had really great weed control. We lost control over the years, but we started really great. And I mean, the biggest challenges we had were running a cooperative business, but the agricultural challenge is something that we were really well prepared for.
Okay, so it sounds like you had a lot of strong farmer brains coming into this situation. What was the
Totally.
What was the whole cooperative farming thing? How did that come together? Was that something you were seeking out, or was it just a bunch of friends that just happened? How did that come about?
We all studied agriculture together at McGill University, McDonald campus of McGill University, and that's how we met. And I was studying agriculture engineering. Everybody was studying different fields, and so we became really good friends in school. And we started working on farms during the summer. And then, at a certain point, when you're working for other people, you kind of get tired of making their mistakes, and you're ready to make your own mistakes. And we all kind of came to that around the same point. And we had never had a big vision of all farming together, but we all were really good friends, and farming was at the center of our friendship. So when a couple of us started talking about it as a project together, just everybody was interested, and we went forward with that together.
So do you guys is it equal share situation? How does the sort of legal structure of that work? Just because I know that this isn't a common setup for people.
No, it's not, but it's becoming more and more common.
Absolutely. I know Jesse's fascinated by this stuff, so.
So each person pays a qualifying share to enter the co-op. At the beginning, it was $2,000. We've since raised it to $5,000. So that's people's membership to join the co-op. And at that point, each person has a vote independent of share. And at the end of the year, if we have profits, they'll be returned to us as dividends in function of the number of hours that we've worked. And that'll either be as cash or as more shares in the business. So over time, we gain more shares, and we have more shares than the newer members would have. But we still just have one vote and the vote is really at the general members. We have a general members, an annual general meeting, I guess, sorry, the AGM once a year. And so at that point, everybody has a vote. Anyone who's a member can be on the board of directors, and then the board of directors is who kind of guide things through the year, meeting once a year or once a month. But yeah, so it's that $5,000 shares that people can buy in on, and with that, if folks like our newer staff, They don't have to pay that $5,000 right off the top. They can have it deducted from their wages. I think it's 7% kind of per paycheck type thing.
Okay. And so how many members are there right now?
So right now we're 7 members.
Okay. And does everyone work there as well, or can you just be a member?
Everybody works there. Yeah, it's a worker co-op, so it's the kind of
Okay.
the owners are the workers.
Okay, cool. And then you said there's also a board. Is that how the sort of larger decisions are made?
Yeah, and so at this point, our board of directors is 7 people, the same 7 members. So kind of at this point, like everyone's the same. But if there were more members, it would still just be 7 people on the board. And excuse me. And so the board of directors is what's guiding the really big picture. So kind of talking about annual gross sales targets and big directions that we're going in. Maybe higher, like when new people become members, and then like if we change our bylaws, that's at the board level. But then we also have a number of departments. We have like a 6 departments. So I run the seed production department, and I also run or co-run sort of our marketing department. My wife Emily runs the vegetable harvest department. He does the vegetable production department. What else is there? There's finances, or admin and finances department, and then infrastructure and machinery. So each director who runs one of these departments, within that department, they have a decision-making power. So they don't have to. They're not running everything by the board. The board kind of just sets the big picture, and then each department has basically a manager who runs it, and then staff underneath or who work with them, and yeah. And so it's not necessarily we're not meeting about every single decision at every point of the ladder.
Otherwise, you'd just be having meetings and you wouldn't probably get much done.
That's right, yeah. And learning to have a good meeting has been, a ongoing development or learning.
Okay, very cool. So what are some things that have been compromises you think that maybe you've taken on to be in a cooperative farm?
So I think that in the early years, the big compromises that, on my perception, or the way I would have done it, was maybe in the scale. I probably would have farmed a lot smaller, like something like half an acre, maybe with the BCS, and tried to really kind of, a lot of what we're seeing now in these small acreages that are with quick turnover crops, that's probably the way I would have farmed. And I was really interested in that high intensity. And, from my experience, I knew that I could be very successful in that. And that's something that I thought was a compromise initially. Over the time, like in the early years, I could see sometimes like maybe I could have made more money that year, or I could have done more in a specific situation. But over the years, I've definitely seen that my quality of life's a lot better in the co-op than if it wasn't in the co-op. I think that if it was just my wife and I who were running a farm, I think we'd be a lot more stressed out. We'd have to work harder than we do in this cooperative situation. And so I don't really think of a lot of co-op. I don't think of it as compromises really anymore. Maybe in the early years it was more compromises, and now it's more about working out what the best situation is for the business at this point.
Cool. I think the biggest thing that's obvious to me when I'm talking to you is that everyone can wear, maybe a few hats instead of all the hats. And so you can, you can really focus on your department or whatever. Cause like I'm a one man show and I got to do everything. So like, I'm not great at everything, but I do everything. I feel like that's a huge advantage.
Yeah, it's true. And so like, I do some of the bookkeeping, but not most of it. And when it comes to time to file taxes and stuff, I'm not all involved with that. I barely deal with the organic certification. All the tractor maintenance and repairs and all that, that's not something I have to worry about. Even like in the greenhouse, for our seed department, I just panned over our list to Renee, and she makes sure the team gets the plugs ready and the seedlings ready. So there's a lot of places that I don't have to worry about, and know that, and I know that they're going to happen really well.
Okay, very cool. If someone's like thinking about getting into the style of farming or maybe starting a cooperative farm, is there certain things you want to consider? And like, are there any good like resources for this? Or are there any like where you can...
The Greenhorns have a cooperative farming book. That's that's one of the few like co-op farming books that I know out there. There is a number of co-op farms out there, so I would say talk to them as a good resource. But things to know is, in our society, there's a lot of talk like in school and other places about doing teamwork, but I don't know that we really know how to do teamwork, and it's really a skill that we have to develop. So I think a lot of work on communication, like we used a communication system called nonviolent communication to talk with each other. I mean, we don't use it actively, but we've done these nonviolent communication trainings and holistic management. And so tools like this to better able to express what it is we want and being able to kind of build a communal vision really go a long way. I also think that when you start off any kind of venture, it's very difficult to think of it in the long term and to think of it really as a collaborative venture. And we tend to approach it more as if it's like our own business and the equity that we want to build. And in a co-op, you're not building the equity the same way. So you have to kind of look at it more as a long game where you're building the business that you want to be working in. And that what you're gaining is a great workplace, a salary, a better schedule. That's really what you're trying to gain, not trying to build up a farm that you can then sell later on to retire on. So, and I think that took a while to really understand that. And I think that's a really important thing for people to think about.
I agree, and I taught high school for 5 years, and I think like when you talk about like, teamwork or group projects and stuff like that, and people are like whatever, and they get out in the real world and they like struggle. You have a group project in college if you go to college or whatever, and people like there's always like one dude pulling their weight, and I don't think the collaborative farming model works for everyone, and I think I think the people that get involved are of a certain mindset that I think is very unique, and I'm sure that the group of people that you're with. Is there something that like, I don't know. I just feel like it's got to be a unique group of people that are interested in this because I think everyone's sort of like out to get their piece.
Yeah, I don't know if I would. We're all people who are hard workers, and I think that we have very good intentions and kind of a desire for a better, more just world. So I think these are things that we have in common, but we're very different from one another in many different ways, like different thinking process. Some of us are very numbers oriented. Some of us are more kind of intuition based, and I think that that combination of different personalities and brains is really, really powerful because when we work through something, we come to a much better conclusion than if we were solo. But I think maybe the most important thing we have is that I'm trying to formulate it, is that we really trust each other and we believe in each other, and we're willing to it's not always easy. We definitely come to conflicts, but we know that each person has the best intentions at heart and are able to kind of judge them by that factor as opposed to by the disagreement we're currently having. And so the fact that the five of us have been able to have that capacity, like the 5 founding members, and has really helped us like create a business that's gotten this far. And I think that that's something that we really try to transmit as a culture for our business with all our new employees. So I don't know if that answers quite your question, but it's what I think. Yeah.
I think it's the hardworking, and I think there's trust. I think that's not common with everyone in the capitalistic society we live in. And I went to see Pam Dowling at Twin Oaks Community a little while ago, and that's like another level. That's like they share everything. It's a commune. It's an intentional community. And like I left there, and my mind was just like blown. I just that sort of trust and sharing is like a whole nother level of just like cooperative farm. But like no one's like stressing about stuff. It's just like everyone can do something different and add their piece to the puzzle and make it work. So it's super cool. I think there should be more discussion about this sort of stuff. I know you've been in it a while, but I think it's a kind of a foreign concept for a lot of people. And so that's why I really want to talk to you about that and sort of share that part of what you guys got going on the farm.
Yeah. Is that a question, or you want me to just say
no? I'm just telling you. That's why I want to talk about it. But no worries, Dan. Let's switch gears a little bit here, and because there's been a couple questions coming in about your spreadsheets and your software, and that's something I definitely want to talk to you about. And you can get as nerdy as you want here. There's no
okay.
There's no like nerd level here. Like go
I'm
for
ready.
it.
Yeah.
All right. So talk a little bit about the spreadsheet stuff, like, the kind of stuff that you're offering. Talk about your course a little bit. I think people want to hear about that.
So I guess the basics of how I approach spreadsheets and what I think people should know about is that it's kind of like I'm building it on three pillars, and it's that you need to have data that's easy to enter. You need to have spreadsheets that speak well with other spreadsheets, and you need to be able to understand your results easily. So that's kind of where I'm starting with, and um, and um, and so that's what I'm just trying to continuously reinforce with people, because it's not just about it's not just about the formulas you use, but it's about the approach that you use when how you build a spreadsheet and how you build kind of like a planning system. And so this first course that I'm gonna give is about crop planning. With spreadsheets. So we will go through crop planning. We're going to look at, starting with your harvest needs and then figuring out what you need to grow in the field and then figuring out what your seed order is for that, and then kind of look at monitoring your actual harvest and kind of that linking that back together. So there will be a layer that's very practical, and I think that some people could take this course just to follow that and ignore the deeper spreadsheet. And as we're doing this, we'll also be looking at a set of spreadsheets that do all these things, and I'm going to explain how each step happens with the different spreadsheet pieces, so that people can, because when you take, if you use somebody's app or you use somebody else's spreadsheet, you don't always know how they were thinking, and you don't always have the same, you don't have the same farm, so you need things to be customizable. And people kind of hit a stumbling block where they can do some things but don't necessarily know how to tweak it for their needs. So what I want to teach people how these different pieces work together, so that then they can use it to adapt it to their own needs. And so that'll be the first, I guess, semester of the Farmer Spreadsheet Academy will be around crop planning and and teaching how that all works. And in future iterations, we'll kind of look more into financials and HR and other aspects. But I think that at the base part, it's really the crop planning that's really important.
Okay, so man, I have a lot of questions about this. So how's the course structured? You said semester. Is it like an ongoing thing? Is it like there's lessons that you can?
Well, I guess I'm making it up as we go along. And,
okay.
So this first course will be kind of a standalone course, and it's going to be four session, or I guess 4 courses, kind of over 4 weeks. And I mean, if we're talking, I guess I'll start probably registration around, I think it's around the 7th of January is on my calendar, and kind of starting the actual course, I think it's the 27th of January. And so it's going to be over 4 weeks, and each week is going to look at a different topic. I'm not 100% sure what the order is, but we're either going to start with your harvest needs or else start with the actual crop plan. And then, so each course will be about a specific piece of your crop plan, and we'll kind of go into that. And then each course, like the part that we look at will kind of be self-contained, but as we tackle each extra part, we'll kind of make the spreadsheets more complicated. And I'm also keeping, so I'm going to be using a lot of formulas and techniques that so the average user might not have been exposed to, but it's still going to be within like a lot of farmers' skill sets. We're not going to get into macros or programming. We're really going to, like, there's a lot you can do before you get to that point. So it's still going to be at I would say simple level, but it's like simple advanced, it's or simple moderate. And the spreadsheets can do a lot more than people realize, and so that's what I'm trying to get to.
Okay, so that was basically one of my questions. Was like, most people are scared of spreadsheets, and this, right?
Yeah.
And so like they want an app they can just turn on and start plugging stuff in, but you're really advocating for the fact that if you understand how it's set up, then you can tweak it for your own situation.
Totally, and that's a challenge. Like, so I don't know the app world so well, but what I've seen of like crop planning and farm management apps is that they make you think a certain way, and you might not necessarily think that way, and your farm might not be designed that way, and they kind of have a limit. And with spreadsheets, if you're able to if you're able to customize them a little bit, you can make them do what you need to do almost all the time.
And do you think you think you can get most people on board with this way of thinking, or is this like there's only some people that are gonna be like, all right, let's really nerd out on spreadsheets? Because I think there's a lot of people that don't want to get that deep into it, even though you're saying it's going to be more customizable and more applicable to their farm.
Well, I mean, there are some people, if they don't want to do spreadsheets and they don't want to work on a computer, this is only going to go so far. But, um, but a lot of the concepts are still the same. Like, you could take this course and choose to not listen to the spreadsheet part at all and just listen about, like, the order of operations, about how you would plan, and, I guess one thing I did plug, and maybe I got a copy over here. I'm the co-author of Crop Planning for Organic Vegetable Growers.
Awesome.
This was published 10, 11 years ago. And, and it's my co-farmer, Fred, and I, we wrote the book, and it kind of have an 11-step system where you start off with how much money that you need to make for your farm, and then figure out what your marketing plan is to grow enough, and then figure out what you need to grow to hit your marketing plan, and then how much seed you need, and then how to monitor it all. And so you can do that with spreadsheets or without spreadsheets. And so I will be kind of following the same structure, but in this case, when we wrote this book, we didn't have the spreadsheet skills that we have now. And so the spreadsheet skills I have at this point, like if I was writing this book, it would be a different aim. But I think there's a lot of, I meet a lot of farmers who want to plan better, or who don't even know that you can plan. Like that's the one thing is I meet a lot of farmers who just, they're learning how to grow, they're learning how to market, and they don't even think about the fact that you can learn how to plan. And once they have a framework down, I see a lot of growers who there's a light bulb that goes on, and they realize, oh, if I actually want to make a living at this, and I grow these things, and it works well, it'll work. And a spreadsheet is a really good way to do that. And I think that growers who that light bulb turns on will take the time to do that crop planning. And you can do it really in depth, and you can do it a little bit more superficially, but either way, you'll have more results than if you didn't do it at all.
Cool. So is a big part of this just keeping track of your own data, like harvest data, planting things, financial stuff? I mean, is that a big part of this? Or, I mean, you were talking about crop planning, so I guess it's tied together, but what do you think is like the more important thing to be focused on if you were just to get started?
Well, all of it you need to work on, but I think that at the beginning when people, so this is not specifically spreadsheets, but I think the first thing people need to know is how much money they need to make. And is it $10,000? Is it $50,000? Is it $100,000? Do you already have savings? Do you have a part-time job? Do you have kids? Do you have a mortgage? Like, all those things change your situation. So there's not one good answer for anybody. And knowing how much you need to make. So let's, like, if you needed to make $100,000, just to have a round number, and you wanted to do a CSA share, and your CSA baskets would cost $500 each, that means that you need 200, is it 20? Yeah, 200 CSA shares, and you'll have $100,000. And so that math, so once you have 200, you need 200 baskets, then you figure out how long your week's going to be, or your season. So let's say it's 20 weeks, and if you want to give lettuce each week, then you need to have 200 lettuces each week, and then how many lettuces you grow if you want to have a safety factor, and then so when you want to plant them, and then when you're going to start them in your greenhouse, and how much more you got to start in your greenhouse before you plant them. So I think all of that is really the foundation part, like once to starting your farm. And I think if you have a good handle over that, then there's other questions that come in. And at that point, keeping track of your harvest, your records, and then being able to analyze that will really nourish your reflections when you make your next crop plan. But at the beginning, you kind of, there's reference material out there, but you sort of take it on faith, and you kind of do a lot of guessing. But even though it's pretend, it's more information than if you just buy a bunch of seeds from High Mowing or Johnny's or whatever seed catalog because they look cool, and you start them, or because you saw it on a YouTube channel, and you just start them and plant them out, and then you get to market, and there's already growers who have that same stuff, or you don't know when to harvest. I guess that's not quite in a spreadsheet situation, but I think that kind of having a plan for your season will make it easier for you to achieve something. And it might be as good as your plan. I mean, and plans change, but having somewhere that you want it to, you know where you want to be, which is your financial goals, and the rest is a journey to get there, and you can keep tweaking it to get to that point.
That's a great, I mean, there's so many good points you made in there, Dan. And I think that I say this a lot, that, a lot of us focus on the soil health, the growing strategies, the bed flips, like all the sort of actual growing stuff. And then we don't think about marketing, sales, planning, how much money we're actually making. I think that sort of discussion doesn't happen as often as it should. So I think this is all really important stuff to be sort of bringing to the surface and giving people the skills to do that. Like, what sort of you mentioned before about having data that is you're able to input. What did you mean by that?
So that's a good question, and it's that there's there's two parts to it. One is, like in a spreadsheet, you want it to be clear what it is you're entering, but also, like, let's say you're keeping track of your harvest, or you can keep track of so many things on your farm. So, like, if at your harvest, you could keep track of how many bunches you did, how much they weighed, how many bed feet you harvested from, how long it took to do each of those things, and all of those can be valuable, but if you don't use them, then it's wasted time that you could have been harvesting something else or washing something or selling something. And so you need to kind of know what you're trying to get to so that you have the right information. And then so that's kind of a first part of it. And then the second part is, or I guess I refer to that, but is how you get into the spreadsheet. And so in some cases, it just makes sense to have a spreadsheet with a bunch of rows and a bunch of columns. But a tool that really works a lot too is, like, I use Google Sheets at this point. Like, I've moved away from Excel. You can do a lot of great things with Excel, but in a collaborative environment, Google Sheets does really great things. It also is hooked up with Google Forms, which is I guess a software that you can run surveys out of and ask questions. And so Google Forms is a really great way to get information into a spreadsheet, because on the back end, it's just all the form fields feed into a spreadsheet with different rows. And so having a so on our farm, we have a harvest, like after harvest, or people keep track of their harvest on kind of on clipboards, and then they come in, and there's a on the computer, there's a URL they go to, and it just says, like, what crop did you harvest, what variety, if we care, and then how much you harvested of it, and what units you harvested, and where did you harvest it from. And so just type that in, and it goes straight into that spreadsheet. And so that spreadsheet can stand alone, but you can also link it back to your crop plan if you want to see what you were hoping that happened and what actually happened. And so there's a lot of levels of analysis you can do, but it starts with knowing how you're going to get information into the spreadsheet. And that's really important when you're using with staff too, because, like, you might have a high tolerance for like 10,000 cells and dealing with them, but when you have people who they just want to harvest salad greens or whatever, and they come in, they don't want to have to tackle this monster. Like, when we moved to these Google Forms, the level of happiness around data entry just shot up. Like, people were so excited about this and happy to not worry about other things. And then also, some of the managers were happy that people couldn't accidentally delete whole sections of data because they were just like, a simple thing of a couple questions.
Okay, so Google Forms essentially, like, creates an interface for people that interacts with the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's just, yeah.
Cool. So do you guys, like, in your wash pack station, do you have, like, just a computer sitting there? Like, people come with the clipboard and they just enter the data themselves?
Yeah, we've begun to have computers a little bit all over,
Okay.
but maybe actually that makes it sound like there's more than there actually is. So we do have because we also run a seed company, right? And so in the seed seed building, we actually do have computers all over because people are just referring to things all the time. But in the barn, we have one computer right beside the wash station, and we keep track of stuff as it's happening on clipboards because they're a lot they don't like to be sprayed with water or get dirty, but they're a lot more tolerant, more forgiving. Whereas if you have a couple $1,000 machine, you don't want that to get dirty. And so we keep track of things on clipboards, and then afterwards we'll update the forms or spreadsheets from that.
Okay, and I think a big struggle for people is just creating the systems to have employees enter that data. I think that's part of like the culture and the system that you guys have in place. So just so I'm clear, like the people harvesting, like they'll fill out the clipboard and then they do the data entry themselves, or does that clipboard get handed off to somebody else?
So it can be either. And so like, just if you want to even go a step back, like this is not what you asked, but Emily, my wife, she's the one who leads the harvest. And so she does all the planning, the couple days before, and she winds up with, she just exports a report that's easy to see, and she brings it to the wash station and then writes down some of the key things on a blackboard. And then people will take a clipboard with a blank sheet, and then they'll say, like, so people are assigned, different employees are assigned to lead different crews. So the person, somebody might say, we're harvesting 200 bunches of beets, 200 bunches of carrots, and they'll just note the different stuff. And that's how it'll start off. And then in the field, they'll record where it's coming from and how much each thing was done. And sometimes they'll also do notes on quality, or if there's any kind of notes, but that's a secondary thing. And then they'll bring this back, and ideally, and this is when it's great, is they'll enter it themselves. And if they do enter the sheet, then they take the sheet, like the spent sheet, or the sheet that's been entered, they'll put that into a separate area. So it's known that it's been processed. Otherwise, it goes into a like a folder, or just a hanger on the wall, and it'll be known that it hasn't been done. And then Emily will wind up by default keeping track or entering the last stuff that hasn't been done. But we try to get people to do it in a quick way. And one thing I didn't mention, but there's also a question at the end of the harvest. The harvest log is, what does the next harvest look like? Is there more out there than we currently harvested? Is it about the same amount? Is it less, or is the crop finished? And so just that can also give Emily an idea of what that planting looks like for the next plant, the next plant or the next harvest, because she's trying to manage all the crops at the same time, and the person who just harvested it might have a better idea of that specific planting than she can have at that point.
Very cool. So is this part of the? I know you're saying that you're gonna, in your course, either share some of this setup or teach people how to set this up. Is this part of that? This
this
harvest?
is part of. So this, in whatever scenario, this will be the fourth course. We'll be looking at the actual harvest. And the first three will be about the crop plan itself, and then the last one will be the harvest, and we're going to link it all together. And that'll folks will have, by the end, folks will have access to a out-of-the-box crop planning spreadsheet system that they can use at home, or modify or be inspired by. And I do hope people take this and do new things with it. Everybody's farm has different needs, and but they can start with this. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm just looking through some of the questions here, guys. And if you do have questions for Dan, please drop them in the comments there. One question was about your software. You said you use Google Sheets. Is that a paid thing, or is that a free thing?
That's free. So Google might be tracking everything you do in the world, but I think there's a certain amount of privacy. But it is a free software. So it's if you have a Google account, you can use Google Sheets. There's Google Document with equivalent of like Word, Google Form, and and they work all really well, nicely together. And it's easy to have, like, they live in the cloud, which can be a challenge maybe with internet access for some people, but for most folks, it's not that much bandwidth. If you can watch YouTube, you can probably use Google Sheets. But when you can have multiple users updating at the same time, and you don't have to have like one version on Dropbox or one version that has like 1,000 different versions. This all simultaneously happens, and you don't have to save it. It just automatically saves.
That sounds perfect, and it's free. I mean, Google sees everything I'm doing anyways. I mean, what am I going to...
Yeah. I mean, you could,
Got the Google phone, got a Gmail address. Like, they already know what's going on. All right, cool. Let's see what else we got in here. Um,
I didn't think we talked this much about spreadsheets this early in the
I mean,
conversation.
I don't know. I mean, I want to talk about seed stuff too, Dan. There's so much stuff to talk to you about. But it seems like this is definitely something that you're really passionate about. I mean, I know you're passionate about all this stuff like going on, but I think this is something that's can be very helpful for people, and I think people aren't often thinking about spreadsheets. They're thinking about seed orders and stuff, and I don't know, like this time of year, whatever they got going on, it's probably not spreadsheets. And I know that I'm not great about record keeping, and like that is something that I would love to improve on in the future. So, and I think all of us could admit to that thing. Like record keeping is hard for people to stay on track of. So here's a question. John McCafferty is saying, from your crop planning sheets, are you able to create harvest orders that are transferred to invoices? And are you able to track projected yield and compare it to the actual?
So there was harvest orders.
Harvest orders, can you transfer those to invoices? And then are you able to track projected yield and compare it to the actual?
Yeah, so you can project the projected yield compared to actual is not like that. I mean, if you set it up right, and that the way these sheets are set up, we can do that, and that works pretty well. The harvest projections to invoices, that is something that so in this specific course that I'm talking about, we won't be looking at that. That's something we'll look at further on. But you can do it. I guess so in our case, we run a CSA, so that's not something that we do a lot of invoicing, whereas in the seed business, we do a lot of invoicing, and there we are exporting stuff from spreadsheets, and we're importing it in our case, we use Shopify as an online store, but we also use it for our invoicing, and so we're able to bring that in. Depending on how complicated your orders are, like if you just have 2 or 3 items on an invoice, it might just be as easy to type them in on its own. But if you have stuff that has 10, 20 things on it and you're doing a lot of them, then there are ways to do that. But there'll definitely be a so I guess if you're doing your invoicing from Google Sheets itself, you can really make it smooth. But if your invoicing is happening from QuickBooks or Shopify or something else, you need some way to get those together. And that is feasible, but it's like an extra step.
Okay. So it's not a direct thing, but I mean, unless you're doing everything in one place, it's kind of hard to link things together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Ultimately, you can do it, but there's always a little bit more work to get to that. And that's something that I'm not going to get as much into stuff like invoicing and financials and the number and those kind of numbers until a later iteration of this course, either another semester or making the course longer. I'm not quite sure what format's going to be best, but it is definitely on my radar. And also, by the time I get to there, I want to have a really easy answer to give to somebody about that part.
Okay. Lily Homestead's asking, how is your program different from others? I've seen other using spreadsheets or selling a class. Are there other classes like this that are out there?
To my knowledge, there's no class that's really spreadsheet based like this. And I think that if I was, a lot of the courses that are out there, and there's some really great courses, are really about the growing aspect, whereas this is really about the planning aspect and the management and the management of information and decision making. And so that's really where this is coming from. I mean, you can find crop planning spreadsheets online. We probably have some of our versions that we've created that are out there in the past. There's Dan Kaplan from Brookfield Farms has one that's been around for 20 plus years. It's one of the early ones that we were really inspired by. So there are systems out there. I think what is unique to the one I'm talking about, as far as I know, is how seamlessly everything works together. And often you need to do a lot of copy pasting from one set to the next. And with this, when you do your harvest projections, it'll update the next area, and then you make some decisions of what your crop plan is to do that, but you don't have to be copy pasting back and forth, and you can create reports to see what you need to plant in the field easily without copy pasting. And so that's really, I think, what is the strength in the approach I'm trying to bring forward. And it's towards when Fred and I wrote the crop planning book years ago and it came out, there was a number of people who were asking us how they could get stuff to speak together amongst the different steps that we were working with, and we didn't have a great answer then. But now we really can see how to fit it all together, and that's what I'm going to tackle. And this can fit into even larger context, but I think it's good to start with the crop plan, just to self-contain something, bite off a chunk.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere. You can't try to do everything at once. You got to pick something that you're going to organize and start working on. All right, so I think we could talk about spreadsheets for a while, and I'm not kidding. But I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk about some other farm stuff.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about seed production. I know that you said that's your sort of that you're sort of the manager of the seed production.
That's what I manage at the farm.
Okay, besides the spreadsheets.
Yeah. Yes, I do a lot of spreadsheets on the farm. I'm kind of the go-to person to make the other spreadsheets work, but we all use spreadsheets. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about the seed production. You said you have about an acre per year in seed production.
Yeah.
First of all, how did you get into this? Was that always something that was a passion of yours, or was that something that was a big part of the farm starting up? How did that start for you guys?
So my interest in seed started I guess it's the second summer I worked on a farm, and it was my first full season internship, and I was visiting another farm that had other interns, and there was a couple of interns who were really into seed production, and I had not thought about it. I hadn't thought about seed saving at all, and that's all they wanted to talk about. And while I was there, we harvested a kale seed crop, and I sort of saw how it worked, and it seeded that idea. I guess not pun intended, but it gave me the idea that this is something you could do. And over the next year or so, I started to see seeds everywhere. If you don't harvest something on time, it'll go to seed, and you can harvest those seeds. And with cut flowers and some crops, it's very easy to get a handful of seed. And so that's kind of how it started. Later on, one of those people who was working at this farm started her own operation, and she was growing 1/8 of an acre of seed crops that was all grown. She was all growing on contract for their seed companies. And I was really impressed by what she was doing. And so that was probably maybe my third or fourth year farming, so 1 or 2 years before we launched our farm. And so I already had a big seed saving garden at that point, but this kind of gave me an idea of how this could actually be a financial stream in a farm business. And so when we launched our own farm, I did have this idea. Now, we started off, the main revenue source was vegetables. We were doing 110 CSA baskets. We were going to farmers markets. That's the bulk of what we were selling. But that winter before we started the farm, I started talking to other seed companies, and I was very nervous approaching them. I was not I was just some guy saving some seed on a farm. And I barely knew what I was doing. And so at different farming conferences, I would go up to the different booths and I'd talk to whoever was a seed company there, and I would bring up the nerve to ask if they ever hired or contracted seeds. And two Ontario-based seed companies, so kind of just beside Quebec, contracted us for a few varieties for our first year. So in our first year, we grew $700 of seed. The first year of Tourne-Sol, we grew $700 of seed for other seed companies, and so that was the official. So we were selling seed from the beginning, but it was very modest, and over the years the collection got bigger, and I think it was maybe it was the second or third winter that we put together a small catalog with 20 varieties and started to sell seed ourselves. But this was in craft envelopes, with little printed labels on it, very artisanal, and it just grew from there. And in our case, and so this is a place where the fact that we're a co-op has a big impact on the story, and the fact that we had a big vegetable business has a big impact on the story, because the vegetables were paying the way and meant that I could have a salary without having to worry that the seeds were producing a lot of money. Now, they were profitable for the amount of time I spent on them, but I didn't spend that much time on them. And as the sales increased, I would spend more time, but it was always profitable in that area. And so as the co-op, each of us have different things that we're interested in. So, Renee has run cut flowers. Emily had medicinal herb and tea business for a while. We've tried mushrooms. We've done a number of different things, and some things we did for a little bit and then stopped, and then other things we're kind of doing at the same level. Like we've been doing cut flowers at a similar level for a number of years. The medicinal herbs we stopped once we started having kids. This kind of something had to go. But with the seeds, we just kept increasing, and so by being a co-op, you can have different brains looking at stuff and still keep a coherent business. Whereas if we were one or two people trying to do all these different things, something would have to give.
Absolutely. So that growth that happened, was that based on like how much you could sell? Was it based on how much you could produce? Was it sort of like a trial thing? We'll just keep trying to make it bigger. Like how did that progression happen?
It happened really organically for the first, let's say, like 9 years or so. And it's just like, we just kept doing a little bit better each year, so having more varieties in our catalog, figuring out how to maintain the varieties so that we always have the same ones in the catalog. And then we suddenly had an online store. We've been through a number of different online stores. And so it just got a little bit bigger and bigger. And our reputation kind of just grew. And we never were pushing it. It was more that we were letting the sales pull us. And it would just be something like 50% increase a year, which when you're starting with $600, it's small, but it does take off at a certain point. And then something about 5 or 6 years ago, so I was very hesitant to push the seed company too hard because, so when I started at Tourne-Sol with the seeds, we didn't know very much, but over the years, I've learned a lot about seed production. I started going to the Organic Seed Alliance conference out west, where there's so many like fantastic seed world, and people like from High Mowing and Johnny's and Osborne Seeds and others are there, and then some small seed companies and small seed growers. And I started going there in 2008, and I just learned so much, and that really improved my game, and improved what we could do. But I also saw some of the challenges, and something that's different with seeds from vegetables is that with vegetables, if you're at the farmer's market and somebody buys something one week and they don't like it for whatever reason, they can come back the next week, they can complain to you, and then you could apologize, you could give them something else, and you can make amends. And there's a good chance that these problem customers or dissatisfied customers, by you kind of just doing a good relationship building, they become the foundation of your business, and they're the ones swearing by you. They don't remember that bad tomato or whatever. But let's say you go to market 30 weeks a year, you have 30 opportunities a year to build on that relationship. Now, as a seed grower, most people place a seed order once. And if they're placing it through an online store, they don't even see you. Let's say they buy the seed in January or February, they're not planting it out until April, May, June. So when they plant it out, if there's a problem, now a lot of gardeners kind of blame themselves. Farmers always blame the seed company. But if there's a problem, it's true. Yeah, and gardeners don't know that neither group is always right. It's not. So where was I?
Awesome,
yeah, so they have a problem in June, like something doesn't germinate. And they're like, oh, those seeds, they kind of just hate them. They don't tell me that it's a problem. They just never come back. And I don't have that chance to have a relationship with them. And so I knew that if we got bigger and we expanded ourselves and started selling to market gardeners and a lot of people, if we burnt bridges, that might be the only chance we had with some of these clients. So I knew that when we got to a certain size, I wanted to be able to deliver. And part of that is seed quality, but it's actually also customer service. You want to be able to ship within like 2 days of getting the order. You want to be able to take payments easily and not have to hassle people afterwards. You want, if they have a problem and they email you, that you respond promptly and you can solve it. And so, in some ways, the customer service is even harder to master than the seed quality. So I knew that when we would start really pushing the seed business, I wanted both of these things to be active and be able to work on them. And so about 5 or 6 years ago, I felt we were at a point where we could do that, and we started to push more actively, and our business has grown dramatically. So at this point, it's about 40% of our farm is seeds. And right now, the CSA, like, we're kind of at a plateau of 500 members, and we're probably going to stay at that plateau, and we want to just do that plateau better, maybe with less people. But the seeds, we're growing, and I don't know how big it's going to get. Like, we don't want to get a lot more staff, but I think that with who we have and 1 or 2 more staff, we can sell a lot more seed. And so that's where we are right now that we feel comfortable with those pillars of quality and customer service.
Cool. I could take this in a couple different directions, but I guess one thing is I want to ask you some questions about sort of small scale stuff that can be applicable to like homesteaders or backyard gardeners, but also like the business side of it. Now, you said 40% of your revenue is coming from seed production, but acreage, it's 1 out of what, 6 or 7 acres?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's 1 acre. Yeah.
Okay. So that's one part. That makes me think, wait, I should just be a seed grower, right? That's my first thought. Second thought, what about labor? How does that labor sort of divide up?
The numbers are misleading. You know, so we have 1 acre of seed. If the seed that we were growing on it was to be sold to another seed company bulk, it'd probably be. I think this year the numbers was about $32,000 or $34,000 of seed that we produced at bulk sale numbers. Now, and that is very comparable to a lot of market vegetables that you'd get if you just did 1 crop in an area. And the labor is, once you know what you're doing with seed, there is definitely a learning curve that is a little bit different than vegetables. But once you know what you're doing, I think the labor is actually more efficient with seed than it is with vegetables, because the marketing, if you're doing bulk seed in this case, the marketing doesn't take that much time of your summer. Whereas, like, if you're a CSA farmer or selling to restaurants or to farmers markets, in any of those cases, it's a lot of work to harvest and ship. Whereas as a seed grower, you're just focusing, you grow, and then come August, you harvest. And if you have big lots of stuff, you can even using hand tools, you can harvest a lot quite efficiently. But that's at bulk prices. Now, when you're a seed company that's dealing with directly market customers, that's where you turn that $30,000 into $300,000 or $1 million, or, you know, there's not necessarily a direct proportion, but in a seed packet, you probably only have between 10 and 50 cents of seed in that packet. So if you're selling it for $3.50, like retail, then it's just a small fraction is the seed cost, and the rest is, you know, packing it, labor. There's like there's your marketing costs, you know, a bunch of other stuff that goes into it. But the actual growing is not the bottleneck of selling that, of being profitable on that pack. The bottleneck is all the other marketing. So you might be able to grow $500,000 of seeds on 1 acre at direct market prices, but you have to run a $500,000 business. And that marketing machine is very different than marketing $500,000 of vegetables. And, like, you know, you have to have a website, you have to be, it's just so many different steps. And so
Absolutely.
that's the big difference. And so it's in either case, as a vegetable grower, as a seed grower, there's no easy money. That's like, seed is not what's going to make you rich. And I think people sometimes hear the numbers that I tell. And I know on Instagram, the clip that Jesse ran for the podcast episode that we did was talking about like $1 million an acre for tomato seed. And those numbers are true. But can you sell an acre of tomato seed in small little packs? And that's something that I don't think most of us can do. And like, we're not doing it. So that's not my secret get rich scheme. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I was just gonna be like joking around, like is seed production the new market gardening? Like, is that the new frontier for like small acreage? But it sounds like, and I'm not discounting like selling vegetable because that's like a different, that's challenging in its own right for sure. But I think, like for example, microgreens. I know I do a lot of content on microgreens, and people get caught up on, oh, you can make so much money per flat, per tray, per shelf, per rack, and
Mhm.
then you're like, but can you sell it all at those prices? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
sure, you can get $1 million of tomato seed per acre, but like, good luck trying to sell however many packages, 200,000 packages or 300,000 packages of tomato seeds.
hmm and I think that the direct marketing, like running a seed company that sells seed packs, is not necessarily the new market gardening. And I think it's a lot of different thought processes that go into it that then go into running a successful vegetable operation. But I think what is a really good option is growing seed that might be sold to other seed companies, and that there's most seed companies buy in the majority of the seed that they sell, and they're buying it from all over the place. And depending on the skill of a company, they're looking for new growers. And so if you have high quality seed, especially if you have varieties that you've developed yourself or varieties that are rare, you have a market that's there that might be interested in it. And it's so you could have, half acre of vegetables, and you're selling, I don't know, 40 or $50,000 off of that, or 100, or whatever number you do on your small acreage. But you could also be growing one or two rows of a seed crop, and it could be a few $1,000s, it could be $10,000. So we do buy seed from, like, we have two people who are our main contract growers, and like they'll sell us $5,000 to $10,000 a seed a year, and and it's a good chunk of revenue for them, depending on compared to what else they're doing. So it's something that you could do, and but if you do want to get into that, I think the first thing to do is just to save seed for yourself and figure out how it kind of works, and then scale up a little bit, scale up a little bit. So like if you're a salad grower, you could start growing your own arugula seed or your own Tokyo Bacana seed or something like that. And you'd be surprised how little area it takes to grow all the seed that you might be using for 2 or 3 years. And now you could try to do that to save money, but that's not where I think you're good. I think just better management of your farm or better planning will probably save more money than growing a seed crop. But but it can be really fantastic to do that. It's really exciting to do as a grower, and it gives you a fantastic story at market to say that this vegetable, it's from seed to table that we work. Excuse
So
me. I'm losing
no
my voice
worries.
here.
Yeah, no worries. So you're saying that you think there's a lot of opportunity for selling
Sorry about
bulk,
that.
no worries, like bulk wholesale to seed companies with like more rare vegetables or flowers or whatever, like specific sort of unique stuff. You think it's a good sort of side hustle maybe if you're market gardening to have some varieties you've developed that you could sell wholesale to seed companies?
Well, I think that if you're at that point where you're developing your own varieties, and if they're good, there's definitely a market for that. But even for more common stuff, there are some. So there's different types of seed companies. There are some that are really small and well, really small is the wrong word, but bioregional and on the smaller side. So like ourselves, and there's a number of them in Quebec and Canada. But if you're in the States, there's like Adaptive Seeds and Siskiyou Seeds and Uprising Seeds and Hudson Valley Seed Company. So these are companies that are on the small, and a number of them are growers in the area, or sometimes in other areas to get to source their seed. And so that's kind of like on a certain level. And then there's also, you go up and there's different seed companies size. Like, so company like Fedco, they buy in all the seed that they sell, and they like to prioritize getting seed from growers as opposed to getting it from wholesale sources. So they would, like, even for common stuff, they'd be very happy to source it from growers if they could directly. And then somebody like somebody like High Mowing, I think they buy in about 30% of their seed. And this is a part where if it's a common thing, they probably have growers doing it or they do it themselves. But they might be interested in certain crops. And if you get to something like Johnny's, they buy in a lot from contract growers, but I think the prices, just because of the scale they're at, they're looking for growers who might be a little bit bigger than what small market growers might be trying to do. And so there's really a whole ecosystem with different players, and at the bottom level, I hate saying the bottom level, but at the grassroots level, that's what it is. The grassroots level, that's where there's really an interest for local seed, and sometimes it's going to farmers, and sometimes it's going to gardeners. But I mean, they all grow food, there's so there are markets that can take it. It's hard. If you want to get into that market, you don't just grow a bunch of seed and then contact somebody and say, I've got all this amazing seed and I want you to buy it. I mean, I think the first thing is you talk to them, and they might give you a contract and you grow a little bit of seed, and if that does well, you grow it over time. So it's relationship building, and you have to get trust from them and get their trust and start to trust them too. But it's totally feasible. And I've seen a lot of farms on the West Coast which have a better, more, I guess it's a better seed growing climate for most seeds, or for a lot of dry seeds crops. I've seen a lot of smaller farms growing seed crops that they're selling to other seed companies. On the East Coast, it's not as common, and we do have some challenges with some of the dry seeded crops, but like all the nightshades, like the tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, the whole cucurbit family, and a lot of the brassica greens, all those things can be grown fairly well out in our climate. So there's a capacity to do that.
Okay, so I mean, I know this, but there's the sort of adaptive seed growing, right? Like things grow. If you're growing seed in your region, it's going to be more likely to be accustomed to growing in that region. Do you see that that's a trend that's starting now? Like more regional seed companies buying localish, so that their seeds are staying more local. That the tomato that I'm growing is not raised in Washington State, but maybe somewhere in the Southeast. For example, I'm in North Carolina. Is that a trend that's happening, or is that really hard to do?
Well, no, it's totally happening, and I think it's one of the foundational philosophies of a lot of bioregional seed companies is that the seed that we grow in our area should do better for our growers than stuff coming from elsewhere. And it's not 100% true. You can have something that's grown somewhere else that can do very well in your area, but you have to trial it. And so a seed company that's selling seed from elsewhere, you want to make sure that they're trialing the seed that they're selling you. But I do think that, just stuff grown in a bioregion. So I guess it's not just about being better. It's also about ensuring the seed supply, because you might have a seed that's produced out west, or it's produced in Europe or on the other side of the world that does really well for your situation. But if that supply changes, it's not bred for you. It's not being grown out for you, and it's not being maintained for you. You just happen to be somebody who is like one of the end users. And if they, for a business reason, decide to quit offering that variety, you're at the risk of their decision. And so that's one of the big things about getting seed from a local seed source, is that they're probably growing seed for people like you and farmers like you. And so it's part of a bigger seed system that can be built. I've definitely seen seeds that do better on our farm after we've been saving them for a few generations. But there's a lot of things that go into seed quality beyond that a company can do to make sure that seeds work really well on your site. So I don't want to get too much behind that idea that bioregional seeds are the only good ones.
Okay, that's good to know. I mean, I think the frustrations for small growers like myself are like, you have a variety, like you just said, that you love growing on your farm that does well, and then maybe you didn't order enough at the beginning of the season, and you go back and it's gone because you have no control over that. So I think
because everyone else loves it too.
Exactly. I think that's a tough situation. What are some tips or what are some good maybe crops to try if you're sort of on a smaller scale, on like a homestead or backyard garden kind of scale? What are some good things to try to save seed from? What are, if you're just starting out?
The first one I would definitely go with is tomatoes, if you're growing tomatoes, because the part that you're harvesting has the seed inside, so you don't have to do anything extra to actually get to a point where you can have the good viable seed. Well, you have to extract it, but and tomatoes don't easily cross-pollinate. Even when they're side by side, the cross-pollination rates are fairly low, as opposed to like squash, let's say. And so, and even if there is some cross-pollination, the strange tomato you get out of it will be fine, and it'll be edible, and it won't mess up your stuff. So I think tomatoes are a really good first one to try out. Peppers also similarly. Eggplants can be a little frustrating. You really got to get them quite mature beyond a stage that you probably keep them around. So I think the tomatoes and peppers are really good ones to get into. If you have bean plants that you don't wind up destroying after you finish harvesting, and you leave the remaining beans on them, they will go to seed. So that can be a way to get some beans on it. Or if you have pole beans, usually there's more than you can harvest, so there'll be some you can get after. But it's hard to both pick your bean and sell it as a vegetable crop and also harvest the seed, because it's the same part. But it is one that's fairly easy to do, and it's very clear where the seed is.
Right.
And squash, in essence, is easy to do because you have the fruit and the seeds in it, but stuff cross-pollinates. So you'd have to know your different species and do a few extra steps if you want to keep that separate. I think that the Nebraska greens are also fairly easy to harvest because they bolt readily, as we all know as salad growers, and they produce pods that are easy to thresh. And just with like a spaghetti colander or like simple screens, you can get them fairly clean. So I think those are all seeds that are easy to work with. Lettuce is one that the cleaning can be a bit frustrating, but is really easy to get to go to seed, and it doesn't cross at all, whereas Nebraska greens will cross amongst some of the same species. So I think those are some that are interesting to try out. But another question to ask is, like, what do you really like, and what would make a difference for you? And try that out. I mean, things that make seed saving difficult is, does it cross-pollinate? Because if it cross-pollinates easily, then you have to have a higher isolation distance or a tolerance for like something different to come out. Another thing is, does it take more than 1 year to produce? So something like carrots, you got to harvest the root, keep it in your cold room, and the next year plant it out, and then you get the seeds. So that takes a storage situation. It just takes a little bit longer. And then there's also how the actual seed cleaning happens. And so some stuff is really easy to get the seed out, and there's some things that just can be a nightmare for some people to learn how to grow the seed. Once you've been doing it for a while, a lot of the seed cleaning starts to be similar, but at the beginning it looks like a whole mystery and a whole world to discover.
Cool. So, guys, if you haven't already, please hit the like button if you guys are enjoying this video. Also, while Dan catches his voice and drinks some water, let's get a couple more questions in here. I don't want to keep Dan all night. It's about 9:15. So, we talked about cooperative farming, we talked about spreadsheets, and we talked about seed saving. So if you guys have some questions about that stuff, please get them in now before we sign off for the night. But what was I going to ask you about seed saving? Is there, do you recommend for, I guess the audience is kind of all over the place, but let's say you have a market garden, small scale market garden. Do you recommend starting a small seed saving operation just for yourself, or do you think that's sort of like let's just go dedicate one little side area of somewhere that we're playing with a few tomato plants, or what's a recommendation that you might want to say hey, let's try this out a little bit?
I would start with less than 5 things and maybe just one thing, there's nothing wrong with starting with 1 or 2 things. And and I would, in terms of long-term genetics, a lot of crops, if you just grow 10 plants, it's not good for the genetics, or some inbreeding depression that can come in. But when you're starting, 10 plants is fine. And if you had 10 beet plants, 10 beets that you overwintered with a little bit of tops and you planted out, you might be able to harvest, 2 to 5 pounds of beet seed, and you might have enough for a couple years. And this might not be the best beet seed to grow out generation after generation with just 5 or 10 plants, but it'd be a ton of seed. And so I think that when you're starting seed saving, it's about fun and it's about learning, and it's not about the big money, and you're and like in the case of tomatoes, like let's say you grow tomatoes, you grow open pollinated tomatoes, not hybrids. Hybrids, if you save the seed, you get all kinds of strange things, but if you have open pollinated tomatoes, growing those out, you could have all your tomato seed supply easily. And the same thing with open pollinated peppers. So there's a little bit more crossing between peppers, and hot peppers and sweets can cross, so be careful on that front. And there's a couple things that you could see a real impact right away in your seed. I don't know if I say your seed bill, but your seed order. But other things, you kind of just do it to kind of figure out how it works. And if 10 or 15 plants work, the next time do 60, and then the next time do 200. And somewhere around the point where you're doing 200 plants, you're going to have a lot of seed. And that's where talk to other growers. If you had another friend who had a farm and you're both growing 200 plants of something, let's say one of you is growing Tokyo Bacana, another person is growing Mizuna, and maybe another person is growing I don't know, like Ruby Streaks mustard, and you each grow 200 plants, and you wind up with 5 or 10 pounds each, or even 15 pounds. You could split that 3 ways and swap, and all of you have enough seed for a bit of time. And so I think that seed saving does lend itself really well to community projects like that. And so that's kind of what I would suggest, is just start small and do it for fun.
Okay, cool. Do you have any resources for learning about seed saving? Any anything online or any books that have been helpful for you?
Yeah. So there's John Navazio has a book called The Organic Seed Grower, published by Chelsea Green. That is a fantastic book. That's probably the best production-based book that's out there. There's another book by Seeds of Diversity Canada. I don't know how easy it's getting in the States, but it's just called How to Save Seeds, which I think is phenomenal. So those are 2 basic books. There's Seed to Seed, which is an older book that by Susan Ashworth that has a lot of different seed varieties in it, but it's more backyard gardening aimed, though you can still learn from it. And Seed Savers Exchange just published a book just a few years ago, called The Seed Garden, and it's sort of a next edition of Seed to Seed, but it's a little bit different also. So that's a really good one too. But I think that John Navazio's Organic Seed Grower is the book that I really recommend as a first book. The Organic Seed Alliance has a biannual conference, and actually I am also giving a free seed saving course, an online course starting on December 30th. So that's actually another fantastic reference. I kind of slipped. I wasn't thinking about that today, but if people go to my Instagram feed, you can find somewhere in there, or maybe it's in the profile. There is some link to that, and so I'm going to be doing 4. What are the? I launched that a bit before, so it's not active in my brain right now. But there's 4. We'll do 4 weeks, and I think the first one is why grow seed. The next one is what seed to grow. The third one is how to integrate seed into your market garden. This is kind of aimed more at market gardeners. And then the fourth one is actually crop planning for seed growers. So some of the stuff, look at the Farmer Spreadsheet Academy, we'll touch on a little bit in there. And so that's a free mini online course that I've put together just to try to spread the seed saving word to other market gardeners. So I think it's a phenomenal resource. I also have a blog, goingtoseed.net, where I write about seed regularly. And I've been blogging for about 10 years on seed, so there's quite a back catalog. There was a period where we had kids where I published less frequently, but there's still a couple hundred, or at least a couple hundred articles on there. So that's another reference out there. What else is there in seed? The Organic Seed Alliance has a fair number of resources which are really fantastic, and there's starting to be some regional seed hubs, I guess, that are starting along, and a number of seed conferences will not seed conference, a number of farming conferences will have a seed stream. Like I know North New York has a seed stream regularly. I think what is it? The Southern, like SOG, is that Southern, the what's the acronym? But the conference down south, kind of farming one, I think they have a certain amount of seeds work that's Southern Exposure Seed Exchange is running. So those can be places too, and to get more information.
Very cool. So Dan, I left a bunch of links down in the description for this video about you specifically and your farm. So what else? You mentioned you're doing some live stuff too, some live streaming.
Yeah. So I do two live things. One is our farm, Tourne-Sol farm. Every Wednesday at 11:45, we do a live, a Facebook Live through our Facebook page, and we just talk about what's in season, and it's either seeds or veg, and it's often me and another of my co-farmers, or Fred and another of our co-farmers, and it's bilingual. So we talk in English and in French, so it can be a cultural experience. So that's one of the live streaming that we do. On Thursday afternoons at 2 p.m., I've been doing weekly farmer spreadsheet tips. So live spreadsheets are very exciting, and then I take those So I'm live for about 10 to 15 minutes, and a lot of it is a spreadsheet, and then I take that and I edit it down to a 5-minute or so post that I put on YouTube afterwards. So so it lives on beyond the live.
Cool. Well, Dan, trying to wrap up here. Is there anything else? I know it's getting late, so is there anything else you want to share or talk about you have coming up, or point people in a direction of something?
We've actually talked a lot about what's coming up, so I'm I don't have as much to say. I guess there's the Seed Mini course, there's the Farmer Spreadsheet Academy course coming up. Those are the main things. Yeah. I guess I would say thanks for this show. I've been really enjoying this, and then also the podcast. And I think they're really great additions to the farming landscape, and really cover. They're very practical, and I think you're having a range of growers from newer to more experienced, and there's a lot coming in. So I really enjoy listening to it all.
Well, thanks, Dan.
And I'm honored to be part of it.
Oh, I'm honored to have you here, because you bring just so much to the table. I mean, I could have talked about any one of those three things for well over an hour. So thanks so much for coming on tonight, Dan. I'm just going to wrap up, and have a great night, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, and have a great night, too.
All right. All right, guys. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation with Dan. Huge wealth of knowledge from, as I said, from collaborative farming to seed saving and spreadsheet stuff for farming. And man, anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but all of these will also be available as an audio file on the Patreon page. So if you miss some of it, or you don't want to watch it again, or whatever, you can download it as sort of like an audio file and then listen to it while you're outside working. As I said before, we'll be taking the next 2 weeks off for the holidays, so just want to wish everybody a happy holidays. Have a fantastic time with friends and family, and we'll see you on the 7th with Dr. Elaine Ingham. Have a great night, everybody.